What you do today is, in fact, your life. What you spent the last 7 days doing is, in fact, your life. Maybe someone has told you at some point in time you need to get a life. In fact, I was listening to a couple of people the other day talk about Facebook. And the person asked the guy, said, well, are you on Facebook? And he said, no, I have a life. Some people's life is Facebook. Whatever you do with your days, how you spend your days is in fact your life. Now you may not like your life, you may not like how you're spending your days, but however you're spending in your days, that is your life. We're in this series that we're ending today called Transformed. And in this Transformed series, we've been covering all kinds of things. We talked week 1 about our spiritual life, which, by the way, is what we talk about every week when we come to church. But we started off with spiritual life. And then we talked about our physical life, our emotional life, our mental health, our relational health. Last week, we talked about our financial health, which, by the way, was the lowest attended Sunday. Small groups this past week, the lowest attended small groups. So I'm not sure what the correlation there is. But today we're going to talk about vocation. Today we're going to talk about what you do with your days. Now we're going to talk about vocation. I'm going to talk about jobs and careers, but I want you to look and see this through the picture of your vocation. Not just your vocation, but what you do with your days. Because for some of us, we'll go to work tomorrow. We have a job that we have to be. Some of us will go to school tomorrow. And by the way, for the students in the room, your job is school. Some of us were retired, so we're past that. But that doesn't mean you don't have a career. That doesn't mean you don't have a job. That doesn't mean you don't have a life. What you do with your days is your life. And we're going to talk about vocational health today. I'm going to lay some groundwork first, and then we're going to look at 3 or 4 different key things that can help us have the right attitude about how we're supposed to approach our days, because what you do today will be your life. What you do today will be your life. You were created to work. When we talked about relational health, we talked about in Genesis how it is written that God says, let us make man in our image, and that we were created out of community. You were also created to work. You were created to have responsibility. You were created to add value, to give value to life and the people around you. It is in your DNA. God put it there. God did not put in you this idea of, let me see how much money I can make so I can retire. By the way, retirement is not a biblical concept. Nowhere in the Bible do we have anything where God says anything about retiring. You were created to work. You were created to do. You were created to have and add value to life. Our mission at our church is to help people live the truth of Jesus in everyday life, because Sunday morning is important, but Tuesday afternoon is way more important. And Thursday afternoon is important. And Friday night's important. And how do we do that? We want to help each other walk with God. And the third one is make friends. But right in the middle is add value. Because if you're not adding value, you're not doing and being what God's created you to be. To work, to have responsibility is built in your DNA. How else can you explain pets? We have dogs, we have cats. They cost us thousands of dollars. They don't ever do anything for us. I mean, yesterday morning, our dog, Lucy, threw up in our bed. On my wife. And 2 minutes later, we're consoling and we're saying everything's going to be okay and there's no harm. And of course, we're doing this to the dog. Why is it that we care for animals and we need animals in our life? That's part of our DNA. It's part of how God has created us. We need things to take care of. We need things to give into. So you were created to work. Do you realize that God gave Adam a job? He gave him work to do before there was sin. So a lot of times we think work is a curse of the sin, or work is as a result of the fall. No, it's not. Work became hard after the fall. Before that, work was a joy. So God gave work before there was sin. Now, if you're a young man in the room and you're not married, I really want you to hear this. God gave Adam a job before he gave him a wife. Get a job, and then look for a wife. Don't get a wife, and then look for a job. Backwards. Now let me say something to all the young ladies in the room. Your first question should be, do you love Jesus? Your second question should be, do you have a job? And he can love Jesus with all his heart, but if he doesn't have a job, he needs to repent. Because God gave jobs before he gave wives. And he created all of us this desire to work. Now, we work in all kinds of ways. Some of us get up tomorrow morning and go to a job and we get paid for services that we're doing. Some of you haven't had a paying job in a long time because you're a stay-at-home mom. And that is work, is it not? Yeah, that is a full-time job. That's like, I don't even know how many hours a day that is. Some of you work a job and then you go home and work. We're supposed to be working. What we do with our days of adding a value of people is something that God has created in us. And I have found that for most people, unless there is a physical problem, when people are depressed, isolated, lonely, it's because they're not working. They're not adding value to the lives of the people around them. And they've isolated themselves and are into this whole woe is me thing. Because God created us to do stuff. It's part of who we are. Now, this idea of finding meaning in life is an ongoing thing. In fact, I was reminded after the first service from someone that we share a very much a love for the same author, and he said, there are three things that really drive people to God: poverty, pain, and purpose. Now, we live in Anthem, so the poverty thing is not a problem. There's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of people looking for purpose. And pain or purpose is some of the key things that drive us to God. This idea of having a meaningful and looking for meaning and purpose. See if you can relate to this. I know I'm not supposed to read to you, but I want to read to you. Is that okay? Read. There's nothing so monotonous as materialism, the vain and empty and hopeless repetition of one day's duties and indulgence after another. Recently, a man came into my study on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock, and by the way, this is written by J.C. Massey, the pastor of Tremont Temple in Boston. He came into my study on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock. His greeting to me was, "I've come here for you to deliver me." When asked for his story, he said, "I'm a working man. I rise at 6 in the morning, eat my bite of breakfast, smoke my pipe, and go to work. Have an hour off for lunch, leave for work at 5:30, at home for supper at 6:30, smoke my after-supper pipe, go to a show, go back to the hall bedroom, and go to sleep. That is my life 6 days in the week. And on the seventh, I have no hope, no interest, and no other outlook than the memory of the six. I live and eat and work and sleep. That is all. And the monotony of it has become intolerable. Can you deliver me?" Here was a sad experience which I might have duplicated 100,000 times within a week on the streets of this city. What an existence for an immortal being created in the image of God. But it's just what Solomon found. His picture of the monotonous repetition was, and this is from the book of Ecclesiastes in King James style, "One generation goeth, and another generation cometh. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to its place where it ariseth. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth toward the north. It turneth about continually in its course, and the wind returneth again in its circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. And to the place whither the rivers go, thither they go again. All things are full of weariness. That which hath been is that which shall be. And so on, ad infinitum, ad nauseum. Think what it must mean to live with no outlook upon life except the grave. And the reason that I read that to you this morning is this week I had a few minutes in between appointments, and I was just sitting in my office and I looked at my bookshelf, and this happens every now and then. Just felt to pull one of those old books. So I pulled one of these old books, and this is exactly where I opened it up to, which is exactly what fit with the sermon today. And God does those kinds of things every now and then, just the little things that at least lets me know that He's aware of what's going on and we're not in this by ourselves. The reason I read that to you this morning is because this was written by a pastor in Boston in 1924. Your problems for purpose. You trying to figure out how to do life. You're not facing anything new. It's been around for an awful long time. Solomon, writing in Ecclesiastes, after he acquired all of his wisdom and all of his many riches, and the richest man in the world and the most powerful man in the world, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wives, when all was said and done, he said it's all for nothing. So how do I have purpose in life? How do I add purpose to my days? Because what I do with my day is my... I want y'all to get that, okay? Because some of you are waiting to get a life. What you do with your day is your... So how do we do this? How do we get to this point where our life can be more meaningful? Can we have some purpose? So here we go. First one, if you're taking notes, is this. The only validation I need is to know that God longs for my soul to be one with Him. The only validation that I need is to know that God longs for my soul to be one with Him. John 3:16. It's the verse that we all know. It's the verse that's we talk about all the time. We know it so well, we hardly ever use it in church. And this is what it says. It says, "For this is how God loved the world. He gave His one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in Him will not perish, but have eternal life." So what is at the heart of God? At the heart of God is He wants you to know that you have life and can have life to the full. He wants you to know that you have life and can have it for eternity. And when I fall into the trap of thinking my job is going to validate me, I'm in trouble. When I fall into the trap, when I think that my wife or my husband is going to validate me, I am in trouble. When I fall into the trap of thinking that my intellect or my emotional intelligence or my physical health is going to validate me, I am in trouble. And we've talked about all of those things over these past weeks, and we want to be healthy and we want to carry out those things. But it's a byproduct of knowing who we are in Christ, of knowing what our identity is. And my job's never going to have the meaning it needs to have if I don't understand that above everything, that what God wants from me is for my soul to be one with Him. And that is it. I've seen too many people fall apart because they lose their job. And they didn't lose their job. You know what they lost? Their identity. They lost their value. They lost their security. Now, it's not fun. It's never fun to lose a job. It's not fun to go to a job you hate. We'll talk about that in a minute. But regardless, it cannot be what validates you. If it is, you are going to be incredibly disappointed. And it may not happen this week. It may not happen for 35 years. You know that most memorial services, most funerals last about 45 minutes? You know what the key question is afterwards? Where are we eating? It's true, isn't it? If your validation is in this life and this life only, if your validation is a job, if your validation is being physically fit, if your validation is trying to be the smartest person you can be, none of those things are bad, and we all should strive for those things. That's not what I'm saying. But foremost and first, my validation needs to be that I'm a child of God. And everything else is just everything else. Second thing, how to make my day a little bit better, a little bit more productive, have some purpose, is this. Second one is this. Jobs are a means to do ministry. Remember how I want you to define job. Taking care of your pets a job. Cooking dinner is a job. Doing the laundry is a job. Going to work on Monday morning is a job. Taking care of your house is a job. We all have jobs all the time. Some of our jobs we actually get paid for, most we don't. But every job is a means to ministry. Now, the job that you get paid for, one of the things that I try to do is when I meet someone new, I try to never ask them what they do. I try to ask them, how do you make money? And when I ask them, sometimes I get the retired thing, and then my question is, well, what did you used to do to make money? Because a job is to make money. And we need money, right? Hence what we talked about last week. We all enjoy living indoors. Tomorrow night, apparently, we're going to want the heater to come on at some point. Okay? So we need to live indoors, and we need jobs, and we need money. We all like to eat and go on vacations and have cars and all of those things. But jobs are a means to do ministry. This is what 1 Thessalonians 4:11 and 12 says. Make it your goal to live a quiet life, minding your own business and working with your hands, i.e., also think mind, because most of us have mind jobs, not necessarily hand jobs these days, just as we were instructed you before. Then people, now catch this, then people who are not believers will respect the way that you live. So why are we supposed to work? Why are we supposed to work with our hands and mind our own business and have our stuff together? Why are we supposed to have our stuff together? Because non-believers will pay attention. Non-believers will pay attention. They will respect the way you live, and you will not need to depend on others. That's the second reason. So that people will pay attention to how we're putting our life together, and then you don't want other people to have to take care of you. God put inside of you the desire to work. He put the desire in you to succeed and to be successful. So don't think that is a negative thing. I've met people, and you may be that one of those people. Some people, God, their purpose for them is to make money. You know what that's like. You've met people, it doesn't matter what they do, they just make a lot of money. God is like anointed them. This is your job. Your job is to make money, to finance my kingdom. And then for some of us, we work really hard and we never have any money. That's not God's purpose for us. That's something else. But regardless of what the purpose is make it your goal to live your life and to work. Ministry, jobs are a means to do ministry. I have a friend, back when I was in my youth pastor days, and I had somebody who was he was just one of the key lay leaders in the group. And he's just kind of like my right-hand guy. And we were camping one time in North Carolina, and we were on a hike. And he made this statement. He said, Marty, he said, the electric company that I work for, pays for me to be a youth pastor. And I kind of stopped and kind of had to think about it and said, what do you mean that the electric company you work for pays you to be a youth pastor? He says, well, see, I go to work Monday through Friday, and I do my job as an engineer at the electrical company so that I can pour my life into students. And by the way, Marty, they pay way better than the church. And that's true. See, he understood why he worked. He didn't work. The job wasn't what was validating him. The job was what was giving him the ability to do what God had called him to do. So I'm going to throw out some biblical characters. We'll see how biblically literate we are. I'm going to throw out a name. I want you to tell me what their job was. Ready? Moses. That wasn't his job, though. That's what he did. What was his job? He's a shepherd, okay? For 40 years, he was a shepherd. 40 years. So when you're proud, I've been with this company for 23 years. Okay, 40 years. shepherd in the wilderness working for his father-in-law, which means he had a mother-in-law. 40 years as a shepherd after he was a CEO. See, before he was a shepherd, when he lived in Egypt, he didn't have a six-figure job. I'm not sure he had a seven-figure job. Because his daddy, he said daddy, everybody else called him Pharaoh. He went from that to a shepherd for 40 years before he was ready to lead the people out of Egypt. Peter, fisherman, he's a commercial fisherman. Paul, he's a tent maker. David, shepherd when he was young. That was the paper route job. Then he was a soldier. Now he ended up king, and he ended up king because God anointed him, but he also ended up king because the people were singing song. The young ladies were singing the song. Saul has killed his thousands, and David has killed his tens of thousands. Jesus, carpenter. So the Bible is full of men who had jobs. And their jobs allowed them to do the ministry that God called them to do. And this is how this works. I have to remember this, and my job is a means to do ministry. Remember this. It is rare to get paid for something you love to do. It is rare to get paid for something you love to do. It is rare to get paid to do something you love to do. It is so rare that we romanticize the people that do get to do what they love to do. And you can get to do what you love to do, and if you're really good at it, and there's not a lot of other people that are really good at it, and it's entertaining, we pay you millions of dollars to do it. As we are in church this morning, there's lots of people watching football today, and you're going to these guys, these grown men running around on a field with painted lines, chasing a football, making millions and millions of dollars. And we always hear this. We hear this argument. I cannot believe that this such and such quarterback makes $20 million a year, and the third grade teacher only makes whatever. This is such a travesty. This is just not right. This is just how screwed up our world is. Well, let me tell you how this works, in case you haven't figured it out. There's about 10 people on the planet that can be an NFL quarterback. If your team is winning right now, you have one of those 10. If they are not, you don't have one of those 10. Okay? So there's about 10 people on the planet that can quarterback an NFL team. As a result, if you can do that, guess what? You get paid lots of money. Now, I'm not putting down, please don't hear this. There's more than 10 people on the planet that can teach a third grader math. It's important. It is incredibly important. Not everybody on the planet can teach third graders math. Okay? I remember when my daughter was in the third grade, one night at the homework, I had to send this note to the teacher. Madison's dad is not smarter than a third grader. She's got to give a speech. I can help her. This, I have no idea. That's how it works. And since it's so rare to have a job that you love, I'm not saying it's impossible. A lot of people love their job. But in order for that to happen, there's some things that have to line up. You have to have desire and passion for what it is that you're doing. You have to have the talent to be able to do it. And then you have to have somebody who's willing to pay you for that talent. You get all of that? You got to have the desire and the passion to do the job. You got to have the talent to do the job. And then you got to have somebody who's willing to pay you for what it is that you do and that you want to do. Okay? So, there's a lot of people who are talented in something, and people are willing to pay them to do it, but that's not what they love. That's not their desire. That's not their passion. That's hence you get a lot of people going to work tomorrow that have well-paying jobs and hate every minute of the day they're at work. Okay? Now you got some people who are super talented, and are passionate about what they're super talented. But the problem is, nobody cares. And nobody's going to pay you money to do that. It's like, that's amazing painting. I wish I could do that. No, I'm not giving you any money for that. You can sing wonderfully. That's great. That's wonderful. It's like, I can just play the radio. I don't have to give you any money for you to sing to me. So you can be super talented at something, and you can have the desire to do it, but you got to have somebody to pay it. Now, here's the other thing that's true. You may have the super desire and passion to do something, and there's somebody who will pay you for what it is that you have a super desire to do, but you don't have the capacity to do it. That's why it's rare. For the passion and the talent and the paycheck to all line up. So since it rarely lines up, what I have to take into account is this, is that job is a means to do ministry. Remember, every Christian is a minister. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you are a minister. Not every Christian is a pastor. Not every Christian is a missionary. Every Christian is a minister. And if you're a Christian, you have a ministry. And the job that you have, the way that you make money, may be how God is using to finance the ministry that He's called you to do. The third one is this. We have to remember that loving people is far more important than any career or job. Loving people is far more important than any career or job. This is what Jesus says in John chapter 13. He says, "Dear children, I will be with you only a little longer. As I told the Jewish leaders, you will search for me, but you can't come where I'm going. So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. For your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples." Your job is not going to prove to the world that you're a disciple of Jesus. Your love for people will. Now, if you're in a small group and you've been going through the stuff that we've been going through, you're going to hit this hard this week. In fact, almost all the teaching this week is about this point. It's about, how do I do this? How do I go about my daily job doing the things that I'm supposed to do? But the thing that we must remember, that loving people is far more important than any career or job. And love means giving grace and mercy and encouragement and instruction and admonishing people and calling them out when they're not right. And there's a long list and lots of ways for us to love people. But what we're called to do is we have to remember that my job is to love people, number one, supreme. My job is to love people. So the next somebody asks you, hey, what's your job? You say, to love people. It will mess them up and it'll freak them out, but it's a great answer. My job is to love people. Well, what do you mean your job is to love people? I'm supposed to love people because if I love people, then you'll know Jesus. That's a whole lot more meaningful than saying I sell insurance. Or I'm a cop. Or I'm a preacher. By the way, I never tell people that. It kills the conversation. The only time I do that is when I play golf with someone and they don't know who I am, and about the third hole after I'm tired of all the vulgar foul stuff, then I drop the preacher bomb as many times as I can. It's amazing how clean everything gets after that. So loving people is far more important than any career job. The fourth one, this is huge. This is huge. This is the biggie. This could have been a one-point sermon. I didn't want to do a one-point sermon because then y'all were thinking, well, what does he do the rest of the week? So I just wanted to come up. But this could have been the one-point sermon. Okay, so here's the 1 point. This is the thing. This is the changer. Last week we talked about money. And if we can get to the point where when I understand that everything that I have is from God, so that when I give back to God, when you follow through with the challenge that we gave you last week, and to take your income for the month of December, not for the whole year, just your income for the month of December, and tithe that amount sometime in December to your local church. And if you will understand that that's God's money and I'm not giving God my money, what I'm doing is returning to God what is already His, it will completely change the way you see it. And if you will see this, that I work for God, not people. I work for God, not people. This is what Colossians 3:23 through 25 says. It says, work willingly at whatever you do. God gives so much freedom. He gives so much freedom. You want to be a policeman, be a policeman. You want to be a fireman, be a fireman. You want to be a third grade teacher, be a third grade teacher. You want to be an NFL quarterback, you need to get a lot of help. But whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. This is huge. This is huge. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that the master you are serving is Christ. But if you do what is wrong, you will be paid back for the wrong you've done, for God has no favor. So we'll take it back. As though you're working for the Lord rather than people. When you work for people, you're going to be destroyed. And that's a heavy word. But when you work for people, you're going to be destroyed. Because at some point, everybody loses their job. It may just be because you're just too old. It may be because physically you can't do it anymore. It may be because the company doesn't want you anymore, doesn't need you anymore. It may be because another company bought your company and now they're going to bring all their people in. At some point, Tom Brady is going to get old and not be able to play. Some of us are hoping that's soon. If you work for people, you're going to be disappointed. We're a portable church. We're like the church, like the Israelites. We have to set up our temple and take it down. So people came this morning, 7 o'clock, put up curtains and stage, and the chair you're sitting in, somebody put out. Now the person putting out that chair, if they're doing that for me, they're in trouble. Because at some point I'm going to disappoint them. If they're doing it for their church, they're in trouble. Because at some point, church is going to disappoint them. But if the person who set out the chair that you're sitting in set it out for the glory of God, they will never, ever be disappointed. And whether you're setting out a chair at your church, or you're flying a helicopter, or you're running parties, or you're running a hotel, or you're the CEO of a company, or you're policing the streets, or you're putting out fires, or you're teaching third grade, or if you're in chemistry class, or in English, whatever it is that you're doing with your day, you've got to learn to do it for God's glory. Not another person's glory, but for God's glory. And if I can get to that point that what I do, everything I do, I am doing for His glory, then I'm set up for Jesus to be my master. Then I'm set up for Jesus to be my boss. And I'm also set up, I'm going to let Him determine the 401k. I'm going to let Him establish the retirement. I'm going to let Him determine what the reward is going to be in heaven. Not goofhead Bully Bob sitting next to you. So if I can get to the point when I can see that everything that I do is for God's glory. Here's a prayer that I've prayed for a long time. Father, place me in the place that brings you the most glory. Father, place me in the place that brings you the most glory. And that's a dangerous prayer. That's a dangerous prayer to pray. God, I want to be in the place that brings you the most glory. Your family needs you. Your family needs you to work. Your family needs you to see that everything that you do is for God's glory. Your local church needs you. Your local church needs your tithe, needs your resources, needs your intellect, needs everything that you have to offer. Because a local church can exist without you, but with you, it can accomplish far more. Your place of business needs you. The company that you work for needs you. It needs you to do everything you to do for God's glory. And if we can get to this point, things change. Here's what I'm going to end with. A.W. Tozer says it like this. It is not what a man does that determines whether his work is sacred or secular. It is why he does it. It is not what a man does that determines whether his work is sacred or secular. It is why he does it. Because you can do a very, very secular thing and do it for God's glory. It's also possible to do a very, very sacred thing for your own glory. Would you pray with me? Father God, as we enter into the rest of our day and as we begin a new week tomorrow morning, may you remind us that we all have jobs, whether that's to take care of the pet, or to fold the laundry, go to work, build something, police something, manage something, lead something. Father, help us to do it for your glory. Father, this week, would you help us to fly airplanes and helicopters for your glory? Father, will you help us this week to answer phones for your glory? Father, will you help us this week to police streets for your glory? Father, will you help us this week to go to chemistry class for your glory? Father, will you help us this week to make dinner for your glory? Father, you've created us to work. And help us to see that the reason for work is to accomplish the purpose that you've given us in life for the next life that is eternity. And when we're tempted to think that all we have is a job, may you convict us and help us to work for your glory. In your name we pray. Amen.